yeah, it was probably your fault you lost that fish. And here is 14 reasons why. The one that got away. It was probably the biggest fish of your life. I mean, state record, right? Am I right? Yeah, right? Why did my line snap? I used treble hooks. How does a fish get off on treble hooks? Well, I have likely answers to all of these questions. Let's do a countdown. Number 14. Has a fish ever snapped off your line and when you reel in the end, you see something like this? Well, if you see this, it's because you tied your knot a bit hastily. It's gonna cost you, and it's likely gonna cost you a big fish. Now, there could be a couple of reasons why your line is breaking at the knot when it's attached to the hook. And I got good news for you. One, you might be using the wrong type of knot. There's two kind of best practices for line to hook knots. There's the clinch knot, which I actually grew up on, but I changed over a few years ago to the Palomar knot. If you don't know how to tie these, I got some videos which I'll throw in the cards, and you can learn how to tie them for yourself. The other reason why you might be breaking off is because whenever you're tying that knot, you're not moistening it whenever you're pulling it tight. And when you do that, you're actually creating a bunch of friction and heat. And when you apply heat to fishing line, well, it's going to degrade the line, weakening its structure, and it's going to be the weak point. So when you have that big fish on the end of the line, that's where it's going to snap. Number 13 is you might be losing fish because you're not using the correct rod type. It's always good to remember that rods essentially act as a shock absorber. And when that fish makes a run, especially when it gets closer to you, you don't want your line acting as a shock absorber, you want your rod. And if your rod is too stiff and not commensurate with the line weight, well, the end result may be a lost fish. When you use lighter line with stiff rods, what actually ends up happening is that your guides, your knots, your line, they all become stressed. They're doing what your rod is supposed to be doing. Now, don't get me wrong, stiff rods have their place, but only with the appropriate line weight. If you're using lighter line weights, this is where you want to use more flexible rods. So whenever that fish takes that last run, your rod's going to act as a shock absorber. Simply hold that rod steady and allow your rod to tire out that fish, and you'll increase your advantage. All right, number 12, they don't call it ripping lips for nothing. And a reason you may be losing fish is because you have a weak hook set. It becomes more important on those long casts whenever the fish is the greatest distance from you. Most fishermen use barbed hooks, and if you can set that hook past the barb, there's a really good chance you're bringing that fish in. And in order to do that, you gotta set that puppy with all you got. Now here's the thing, if you're using 4-pound test, I wouldn't be doing this. But if you 8-pound, 10-pound, set that thing with all you got. If you notice on the fish you actually do get to the boat that you're not setting the hook past the barb, it's usually user error. It's your fault. Your rod either has way too much action or you're not giving it enough force, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit. All right, number 11, keep your fish from jumping. And you might be thinking to yourself, can I control that? Well, to a degree, you can. It's a beautiful thing to see a largemouth bass jump out of the water, flip around. And so if you love seeing that, because it's exhilarating, well, forget about everything I'm about to say. I would completely understand. But if the goal is to get the fish into the boat because you're in a tournament or because you're hungry, well, keep this in mind. The fish at the end of your line, it's freaking out. You just put a hook in its mouth and it's reacting to the pull of your line. So if you're pulling it this way, it's gonna try to dive and go the opposite direction. You would do the same thing. So a way to keep the fish from jumping is if you want it to go down and away, you're gonna have to pull up. A lot of times I see fishermen, they set the hook, they'll set it sideways, and whenever you do that, it kind of signals to the fish that they can actually jump. So pull up, fish will go down, you will lose less fish. This may not be super important if you got a dink on the line, have fun with it, let it jump. But if you have a fish of a lifetime on the end of the line, you really might want to think this through before it uses the full force of his 10 pounds of muscle to spit that lure right back in your face. Number 10. You know, many of the times when you snap your line, it's happening at the stress points at the end of your line with your knot to your hook or within the last few feet. I mean, rarely do I ever snap a line and I snap it at the reel. It always happens somewhere toward the end. This is why. If you want to add more advantage to your fishing game, it would behoove you to check your knots regularly and also check the last 3 to 6 feet of your line for any abrasions, any nicks, anything. And a lot of times you can do that by taking your finger and just checking it. And if you feel anything's off, well, that's the weakest part of your line. What you want to do is cut it to make sure you can get some more fresh line and you'll be good to go. You'd hate to find this out when you have that pig on the end of the line. It doesn't take that long to do. Just do it before you lose that fish. Don't take shortcuts here. All right, number 9. Have you ever lost a fish while netting it? Or have you ever lost a friend who was supposed to net your fish but never did? I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, have you ever lost a friend? If you have, share it in the comments below. Here's the thing when it comes to nets. You can have the wrong one or you could be using it incorrectly. This is a fishing net I carry on me when I go trout fishing and smallmouth fishing in the rivers. You're looking for a net that can move quickly through the water and have the least resistance. So that bulky net with that rubber coating, although it's great for not having to pick your treble hooks out of it afterwards, is not doing you any favors. It's like dragging a brick through the water. Another thing I noticed, especially when you're fishing with a buddy, a lot of times you just ask them to put the net in the water and you'll kind of muscle the fish to the net. Have a good conversation with your fishing buddy that chase that thing. In a perfect world, that fish is gonna come on plane in the last couple seconds and land right in your net. Well, it's good to have a conversation with your buddy saying, hey, I want you to chase it, move it around, go after it. If you have the right net for the right setting, you're gonna have a higher chance of not losing that fish. Here's the thing, I see fishing in terms of advantage. The more you can tilt the scales in your favor, the better fisherman you're going to be and the more fish you will land. The reality is that this happens incrementally, but if you can increase your chances by 1/4%, you may not have arrived, but you're a better fisherman than you were yesterday. And this is what this video is about. Increasing your fishing advantage. Number 8. Ever lose a fish on a hook set and you swear it was a 10-pounder? Come to think of it, every fish I've lost was a 10-pounder. Well, you may be losing fish on your hook set because you're making 4 mistakes. A good guideline here is that you want to feel the full weight of the fish before you start ripping lips. A lot of times bass don't always inhale it like you see in the videos. Sometimes they nip at it, sometimes you're kind of nibbling on it. So instead of hook setting too early, wait until you feel the full weight of the fish. All right, number 2, reel in your slack. This happens often. You get really excited, you see the fish, take your line, you go over and you hook set a bunch of slack line. So keep your line tight. It's gonna do 2 things for you. It's gonna allow you to set your hook, but it's also gonna give you a better sensitivity. Number 3 is don't retrieve past 2 o'clock. Here's the thing, I fish the wacky worm style a lot. It's essentially tug, 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 pause. But the problem is, if you tug it past 2 o'clock and a fish takes your lure, you don't have enough leverage to set the hook. So keep your rod tip between 1 and 2 o'clock. Tug, 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 reel, reel, reel. Tug, tug, tug. Once again, if you go tug, tug, tug way back here and the fish takes it back here, you can't set the hook. If you do this, you will lose less fish on your hook set. Number 7. All right, this is one of my favorites. Calm down. There's no reason you need to put your fish on plane and horse it to the boat. And the reality is, if you do, you're going to lose it. What you're looking for is steady pressure. And when I say steady pressure, on a scale from 1 to 10, you want to keep that steady pressure at around a 7. Steady pressure wins the day when it comes to landing fish. Now here's the thing, I know there's scenarios where you catch a fish and it's close to a tree, and yes, by all means, horse that thing out of there. But if you're in open water and you don't see any obstacles, steady pressure and you will increase your chances of landing that fish. Number 6 is leave 6 feet of line when you're landing a fish. If you leave a less amount, it's going to increase your chances that that fish, after it takes that one last dive, will snap your line. Let your rod do its work, let your line do its work, but you need to leave around 6 feet, which in most cases is the length, or roughly the length, of your fishing rod. You might need to pull your rod way back, let your fish dance a little bit before you land it, but keep in mind, 6 feet of line on landing fish. Coming down the back stretch with number 5. It's your fishing line. A rule of thumb says you should be changing this out at least every year, with some scenarios calling for twice a year. It could be expensive to be changing line out on all 10 pulls, which may be the reason you're not doing it. There's a lot of reasons why this right here may snap, but one of these may be the culprit. Now, this one may be obvious, but frequent use of your fishing line is going to degrade the structure of it. It's going to make it want to tangle and prone to snap. Number 2 is really a question for you. Do you store your fishing poles with the line on it in your car? Well, if you do, UV rays are not your friend and will degrade the structure of your line, making it weak. Number 3, do you fish with a lighter line weight? Well, the reality is if your line weight's lower, it's gonna have less structure to it and will break down faster. Now, here's one you might not think about. Do you actually store your poles with line on it while they're still wet? If you do, no good. It will break down the structure faster. If you fish saltwater, it's gonna break down your line faster than freshwater. Also keep in mind what kind of line you're using. Your fluorocarbon's gonna be more abrasion resistant than your mono or your braided. So while you may be thinking, I lost that fish because it was a swamp donkey, the reality is you lost that pig because you weren't paying attention to how you store, change out, how frequent, and what kind of line you're using. Dial this in and lose less fish. All right. Number 4. Inside the mouth of that bass you're trying to set the hook on, it's basically 3 things. You got bone, you got tendons, and you got muscle, which essentially act as a vacuum cleaner on that bait. And since you don't know where that hook's gonna connect with the bass, you could have a sweet hook set with a barb going fully through and you're gonna keep that fish on. Or a lot of times you get it to the boat and you realize you basically just pull it right out with no trouble at all. We've all been there. Being that you're trying to set this hook into maybe a piece of cartilage or bone, you can't be using cheap doll hooks. If you're gonna pay a little bit more for something, do it with your hooks. There are a lot of great hooks out there. You got 6th Sense, you got Mustad, you got VMC, which are some of my favorites. And I'm also a fan of the black nickel coatings. If you notice your hook's getting dull, and you can test it like this. You simply take your fingernail, take the hook, and pull it along. If it creates a white line like that, you're good to go. You got yourself a nice, sharp hook. If it doesn't scratch at all on your fingernail, you know you got a dull hook, and you do one of 2 things. You can get a new hook, you can throw that one in the trash, or you can get yourself one of these, which is a hook sharpener. You know, with most single hooks, I mean, you end up, when you do the math, you're only spending like $1 on them. And to be honest with you, I would prefer just to get rid of a dull one and bring a nice new one in. But however, a lot of times you get lures that have these hooks on them. You might have spinner baits, and these things cost $10, $12, $15 a pop. So you're gonna want to invest in one of these hook sharpeners. Properly sharpening a hook doesn't take that long. It really could be the difference between a really great day out on the water and a really bad day out on the water. I thought about taking a moment to show you actually how to sharpen a hook, but then I realized it was getting a little too complicated, and I figured I'd just put it in my upcoming videos. So hit that sub and bell notification and you will get notified when that comes live here in a couple of weeks. And if you don't have one of these, I'll put the descriptions and link below. All right, oh, we're almost there. Number 3. So I was shooting a video about 9 months ago of how to utilize the wacky worm. And this 5-pounder just nailed it. I wasn't prepared for it. And because I wasn't prepared for it, I lost it. And it was my fault. And this is why. I didn't have my drag set. It was a real drag. That's a double pun. Real drag. And here's the thing, most snaps can be avoided by simply learning how to set the drag on your reel. And if you don't know what the drag is, it's simply this. It's 2 friction plates on the inside of your fishing reel. If the fish pulls hard enough, the friction is overcome and the reel starts rotating backwards, letting line out, preventing the break. Here's usually how this plays out. You're not really paying attention to the drag because most of the time you're catching dinks, you know, your 1, 2, 3 pounders. Where this really comes into play is when you finally get a hold of one of those 5, 6 pounders, 7 pounders, and you realize, oh crap, I didn't set my drag. And before you realize it, that big fish takes a dive, you don't have your drag set, and snap goes your line. And here's the rule of thumb. Your drag should be set to about 1/3 or 1/4 of the line's rated breaking strength. All right, I'm gonna throw a curveball in here. The reality is most fishing lines aren't rated correctly. Manufacturers will often stamp 20-pound tests on a line that actually breaks at 25. And they do this because you get the consumer that goes, oh wow, this line is super strong. I'm gonna buy it again. So if you actually want to set your drag properly, you're gonna have to test your line's breaking strength. Once again, I thought about sharing with you how to set your drag, but I figured that's another video I need to do, so I put that in my queue, and it'll be coming to this channel sometime in the near future. All right, let's finish. Number 1, make sure you check your rod guide, specifically the aluminum oxide rings. This actually just happened to me. I was using some braided line, and I kept reeling it in, and then I just noticed that it kept fraying and I couldn't figure it out. I was losing my mind. It took me a little bit to figure it out, but then I was inspecting the tip and I noticed the aluminum oxide ring had a tiny hairline crack in it. And every time that my braided line ran over it, it would slowly fray it. And I couldn't feel it, but I noticed that my line was going all crazy. And it was an easy fix. I just replaced the tip and I was good to go. So before you lose that big fish, it may be a good idea once or twice, maybe 3 times a year, just to check over your aluminum oxide rings on your guides just to make sure there's no hairline fractures in there, because I don't want that to be the reason that you lose that giant fish. So if you want to keep increasing your fishing advantage, hit that sub and bell notification. I will keep videos like this coming your way. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video or out in the water. See ya, bye.